Welcome to the Addiction Solution Podcast. I'm Michelle Dunbar. Enjoy listening and watching as addiction experts Mark Sheeran and I cover controversial as well as helpful topics on addiction, how to move past it, and other related subjects. As two of the co-founders of the Freedom Model, Mark and I will give you a completely new perspective on the topics that matter to you. We will take to task the Recovery Society's lies and misinformation and replace them with facts, research, and the methods to move on from addiction struggles without 12-step meetings, rehabs, and the shackles of endless recovery. Let's escape the treatment and recovery trap together and learn to be free. Welcome to the truth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Addiction Solution. I'm Michelle Dunbar.
And I'm Mark Sheeran, and we co-wrote The Freedom Model for Addictions, Escape the Treatment and Recovery Trap with our colleague, Stephen Slate.
We have a special guest on today, and some of you have specifically tried to connect us with her. Rachel Bernstein, who is the host of the podcast IndoctriNation, is joining us today. Welcome, Rachel.
Oh, it's so good to be here. It's so nice to have a chance to talk to you and to talk this through.
Yes. Now, I want to ask you a question because I read a little bit about you, about your background, and you are a licensed marriage and family therapist. Is that correct?
Right. Yes, I'm an educator and a licensed marriage and family therapist.
And so how does one go from that to being an expert on cults? Because really, you are.
That's such a strange segue, like a leap. So how did that happen?
It's so interesting. It actually started concurrently as I was getting my license. I was noticing there were some friends of the family, I think growing up here in LA, it happens, who were getting involved in different kinds of groups that were problematic. And so I started just doing some research, especially one was a relative. So my family got involved in trying to see if we could understand why there was this sudden personality shift and why there was secrecy and what something had changed in a huge way. But then when I was in my master's program, and I was at USC, the master's program there, and there was a group therapy class that you were supposed to take for part of the program, and it was run like a cult. And I think that actually kind of spurred me on to think, there are therapists who are being trained to do things in a way where there is a strict hierarchy, where you're pushed to share more information than you're comfortable with, where you're rewarded for having more trauma. I mean, it was so interesting to see. It was textbook and right in front of me. And I actually asked the dean of the students to observe, because you could observe behind a one-way mirror. And I said, here's a checklist. This is what I've learned. It's in a book. It was from Robert J. Lifton. And I said, here, just check it out. See what you think. And he afterwards, he said, let's grab some coffee. Because he was a little alarmed. And then it was very interesting. And then my first job was at Jewish Family Service, and it happened to be in the same neighborhood as Scientology. And so suddenly I was getting people who said they had climbed out a window of a building because they were on the RPF. I didn't know these initials and acronyms then. I know them now, but that's their Rehabilitation Project Force. It's like their gulag. Yeah. And this person wanted to come to me to talk to me about her experience. I thought, oh my goodness, like, I think I need to do this. So this seems to keep kind of coming into my vortex. And it's fascinating to me as a psychological issue, but also as a human rights issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this, you just fell into this. So you,
or it found her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these things do, right? I mean,
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So our experiences obviously are similar to yours in a way.
I mean, well, we grew up in a cult.
We grew up in it, and one day it's a strange thing, because one day you're in it. And then one day
you don't know that you're in it.
Yeah, you don't know.
Right,
You're defending it, and you're trying to justify it, and then you just get enough information that's real where it allows the perspective to change. And all of a sudden it's like stepping back and you go, holy shit, like this is weird. Like I'm in a weird altered universe here, and I don't know what's happening, you know?
Yeah.
So it found you. And when did you start the podcast, and how and why?
Well, I want to say about something you just said, and then I'll tell you about the podcast. Yeah. There are a lot of people who are asked questions after they leave a controlling relationship or they leave a cult group. They're asked, well, what was it? And how did it have this hold on you? And just as you're saying, they don't know. Who knows? Why would you know scientifically what the methods were and what they're called that were used on you and with you? Because you're an expert of your experience, but not how it all came to happen, that you stopped being able to think or ask your own questions and know who you are, etc. And so it is still a learning curve for people who come out to understand what happened. But it's a really important piece of it. So they also don't blame themselves for it, that they see they were put through a very well-oiled machine of influence, of coercion, without realizing it, without giving their consent or their informed consent for it. Okay, so now the podcast. So I was talking to people throughout the years and doing general counseling too, but also meeting with people involved in cults and people who came to me saying, you might not know that this is a cult. I think it is. This was my experience. And that's how I've learned about a lot of groups that have mainstream status that really are more cult-like, from the people themselves who are in it. And I remember having this thought, just as the world was also getting more polarized and there was more extremism that I was seeing coming out. People were not able to have kind of conversations because they were so sure that the way they were thinking was the right way. And I thought, this is happening more and more around me. And here I am in my office listening to people's stories of how this happened to them, or they were raised in it and how they broke free. And I almost felt guilty being the only one to hear these stories. I thought, these are important, right? These are important to get out. I'm not going to push people. I'll invite people, but I need a forum for that. So I went to, this is very specific, I went to the House of Pies, the last remaining one. I think there's a new one being built now, but it was a chain in Los Angeles and there's one in Hollywood. And my dad had a few of them. That was part of what he did later on in his life. He had a couple of House of Pies. And so he one time told me, when he passed, unfortunately, when I was 22, but he one time told me that some of the most creative ideas are written on restaurant napkins. Like you just had a thought, right? It's like in the shower, but you can't really write it down there. And I just took a napkin because it made me feel close to him and his positive thinking. And I wrote down this idea for a forum for that, a podcast, and came up with a name for it and hired people and started getting the word out. And it was very important that I prepared people, though, ahead of time for the fact that they might have their story out there. And that means that people might like it or not. And how to be prepared for that afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, that's in and of itself something that is so difficult, because we were extricating ourselves, because we started in AA. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I know it's controversial to say, because Alcoholics Anonymous is one of those mainstream cults that's very much accepted, and that's how we grew up. And so we started there. And I went to undergrad school for psychology. I studied addictions. I was, at the time, a heavy substance user. I was told I would grow up to be an addict, because I grew up in the cult, and so they were saving me a seat. I mean, and I did start questioning things, but you weren't allowed. That's when we knew.
Yeah.
That's the first little indication that you're in a cult, is when you're told you can't question things. And then as we were questioning things more and more and extricating ourselves from it. I mean, we got death threats, and
their whole lives were destroyed for 8 years. I mean, you know, I had suicide attempts. I mean, it was a brutal time. So what would you say, Rachel, is why do you think Hollywood has so much of it going on? What culturally makes that such fertile soil for because this has been going on in Hollywood and
with different cults, right?
Yeah.
It's like
for 70 years, this has been going on there. What do you think it is? Do you have an opinion on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, they are all over the world, but it is also true that sometimes, and I think cults actually to a certain degree have always existed if we look at it as the nature of the relationship between the leader and the followers, right? There are always going to be people either born in this world or formed over time to need that control over people, and others who are open to it for one reason or another, or at a certain time in their life. Sometimes it's a when kind of question, not a who question, who gets involved. But yeah, I think that within Hollywood, there are a lot of people who are transplants here who have left the place that they used to live. And so they're alone. They're looking for community. They're looking for connection. They're looking for family. A lot of people also are getting involved in companies. I mean, of course, there are a lot of big think tanks out here and people who are really intellectual, but there's also the whole arts culture and movie and TV culture where I think people are looking for something that helps them feel grounded because they have to be something or pretend to be something in order to get a job, in order to maintain their job. Take on a role. And I think they're looking to be able to feel that they know who they are. And there are many people out there where if you are not right, if you don't have a sense of a core, I think there are plenty of people out there who will tell you who you are. And
that's a great point.
Right. Will tell you where you're supposed to go and what the meaning is of your life. You know,
that's a real interesting thing. So you'd have just the idea of a director, right? A movie director. No, do that line this way, do that line that way. Can you, so it would, if you had a culture of acting, if you had a culture, because it is in New York City too. I mean, you know, these big places. That's really interesting because you're right. If you don't have an identity and you're used to being directed, and there's an entire culture, right? The Actors Guild sort of culture. There's that power hierarchy that would naturally develop like a religion. That's really fascinating. I just saw a macro view of all that. That's how I see things. That's wild.
Yeah. It is interesting out here. I mean, you know, I grew up here. I've lived other places in New York, Boston, other places, but I came back. My family's here. But it really is interesting to hear people also who get involved in things also because they are not supposed to be cynical. They're not supposed to be closed-minded. If you're an artist, if you're open, if you're liberal, if you're whatever. Now you don't have to be liberal to get involved in something like this. There are plenty that appeal to more conservative-minded thinking. But it's this idea that you're not supposed to be so closed-minded that you can't be open to ideas. And when you're open, that can be great, but you can be so open that you don't question. And we don't learn in school how to question. We don't, it should be curriculum to do critical thinking, to find out what the basis of a thought is before you take it on as your new and best thought.
Yeah,
that is interesting.
So, okay. Well, jump in at any time.
No, you
Michelle.
go right ahead.
Okay. So has this Indoctrination podcast and this mission that you're on, if it's a mission, overtaken what you do? Has it become so big, or is it still sort of a side hustle over here, an interest, or is it becoming more important to you that you're involved in this? Where is it in your life, this whole thing?
It's a good question. It's something that has evolved. I think I try to balance it out. I still have my practice. there are some people who come to see me who don't know about the podcast, and they've come to me through other channels and are wanting to work with me as a marriage and family therapist. And so I like that. I like that I am not just the podcast. I'm also about to put out a journal, like a workbook / journal for people who have come out of cults or restrictive relationships and environments. And I'm working on a book that hopefully will be out in about a year. That's about some of my cases. So I try to do a lot of different things to get the word out, and also still have a life, and I'm a mom and whatever else. But what I really like about the podcast itself is that I've been able to have it move in the direction that I see things happening in the world that are alarming to me. Like it also, I've had people on who are former white supremacists, people who have been raised with a certain kind of thinking and realized that wasn't them. And people who are talking about it, and talking about political movements, talking about conspiratorial thinking. So yes, it's about cults. Yes, it's about malignant narcissism and all the forms that takes and how that impacts those people in their lives. And then I started getting calls about 12-step. And I was not so aware of some of the parts of it that I really needed to check out. And before I'm going to just decide that something is more culty, I'll check it out myself, which I've done if I can. And I found a lot of things that I could see being very helpful, and a lot of people swear by, and I don't want to take anything away from anyone, but I also saw some things that were potentially dangerous and destructive. And so I just want to be clear about that I'm not into labeling entire things as cults, except if it's like Scientology, which is it started as a cult and it's always been a cult. But there are some organizations that I think people really need to be able to have more safeguards in, and there are just not any in place, and there's no interest in putting them in. And that's when I get nervous.
Yeah. So obviously we've talked about doing a podcast where you get to interview us on that AA question, right? And we've been very vocal about it being a cult, straight up. And I have my deprogramming from the 12 steps course that we offer people all around the world. And I don't know if you have that. If not, I'll send you a copy of that. That's a video course that I recorded. And being an AA historian and growing up in it and having a mom that was a guru and her father was a guru, you have something that very few people see, and I was in the inner sanctum with AA World Services Incorporated. And I was the first person to sue AA as well for slander and defamation. And when they came after me and what they did to me, where they printed that I was responsible for missing children. And then they put my address and my name and said that in print, and then sent it to 14,000 groups across the country to silence me. By the way, for the audience, I was not responsible for missing children.
No.
But that's the kind of tactics that they do to people that say there's other ways to get over drinking, So it's a wild ride when people, they've been very successful at hiding what they've been doing to people for 80 years. It's really remarkable. And so it's that'll be an interesting podcast. That's a little ad for our next podcast.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can tell about the health of an organization by how they handle when someone says, this was my experience. And it's not all positive. They're not saying shut the place down. They're just saying this is what happened to me. And this is what I saw happening to other people. Like someone who was on my podcast who is a professor at a major university, and she's been an instructor, a meditation instructor, and a mindfulness instructor and professor for years and years, and still loves it and cares about it. But when she started noticing that there could be inherent issues and that there is a certain percentage of our population that actually gets more agitated when they are kept without movement, when you have to stay still and you have a quiet mind.
Yes.
And when the mind gets quiet to a good 60% of the population, it can be relaxing. But for the rest, it's actually agitating, and it can cause people to feel hostile and angry in a way that they hadn't before. So, and she just wanted to talk about that, so cults will say to you, you're just not doing it right, or you're not doing it enough, right? Because they only have one, like if all they have is a nail, everything has to be a hammer kind of thing. Like this is all they have.
Yes.
So you must not be clearing your mind enough, and you must not be believing it in your heart, and blah, blah, blah. But everyone's brain is different, and there isn't an allowance for that. And she just came on to talk about it. In response, she got threatened. She had her own show. She was threatened on that. She's just been made to seem like she is this evildoer who is just saying, I want people to love it, and I want people to have a good experience with it. But just know, if you don't, that's not your fault.
It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to be you.
Right?
It's really okay to be you, to ask questions and figure things out on your own. Yeah. So
there are some people that are comfortable. I'm going to say this. There are some people that are comfortable not having to question things, comfortable in cult type situations. And I'm sure you've met those people in your work, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's how cults can have longevity, right? You have to have an audience, and you have to have enough. I always say this: the thing about a cult, as you know, Rachel, is it's filled with half-truths. If you come out with something that is on its face totally ludicrous, right? Totally insane, everybody can say that's fucking nuts. Right. And so nobody's going to join.
Right. So nobody does that.
That's right. So nobody does that. So the cult leaders develop an ethos that is filled with half-truths. And I go through this with the AA thing. I mean, it's masterful how it is 50% logic, 50% fact, and 50% mythology and power. And a control model. We call it a control model. So you have the freedom model and you have the control model. And so, but that's the slick part where you get people who are rational to sign on. Like myself, I'm not a
smart people. I mean,
I'm not a dumb guy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. And I'm really glad there's more education now about cultic groups, because people, I think, are less inclined to just go after the low-hanging fruit, which is just to blame the victim and say, well, you're not bright, or you're gullible, or whatever else. But that's putting the responsibility on the wrong person's shoulders. We are all susceptible. We all want to be able to have an answer, and we want a formula. And that's why religion has been so successful, and that I think people are so calmed. Their whole system is calmed by having an answer, by having a guide, by having a formula, that they don't question it. And yes, there are some people who are more open to that, just wanting to kind of be led, wanting to be able to do a trust fall in their lives, in their world, over and over again, and just be caught. And they don't question who's catching them. Why is someone doing that to them? What happens if they fall? Will anyone care? Because that's also what happens in these groups. You find out that if you fall, people don't necessarily care. And it's interesting too. There's this idea that I remember learning years ago. There was a woman, Dr. Margaret Singer, who since passed, who I heard speak at a conference years ago. And she talked about that when you're in a controlling environment or manipulative environment, the phrase was, you learn to deny the evidence of your senses.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Right. It's all part of the gaslighting, I think,
Yeah.
too.
You
And
gaslight yourself.
you gaslight yourself. Exactly.
Yes.
And so leaders, manipulators, they can actually just sort of put the buttons in that
Yep.
you keep pressing yourself because you want it to be true. You want it to be the answer. It's reminding me, I don't know if there's time for a tiny little story about
Oh, yeah.
Of
Go
course.
ahead.
idea.
Of course.
Okay. So years ago, there was this cult group in San Diego, Heaven's Gate.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We
And
know Heaven's Gate.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately, the way it ended, of course, they all died. But what was interesting is that it was a perfect example of this phrase that you learn to deny the evidence of your senses. So they were told by the leader that this mothership was coming to save them all. And what was interesting too is they all did this video before they all died, talking about how happy they were to be leaving their corporal beings and going to the mothership, and however else they talked about it. But none of them talked about death or killing or dying. And I think if they had been given the words to use that were accurate about what was happening, they would have had the emotions to go with them and said, wait, what? But instead it was, we're going to this better place. What was so ironic about it, this is a story within a story. What was ironic about it was that when they're sitting in these chairs, they're being filmed outside in their yard, and there's bougainvillea and there are butterflies going by and a blue sky, and they're talking about how ugly the world is and how it has no place for them. And I wanted to say as I'm watching the video, though it came out after their passing, but I wanted to just shout, turn around, like, look, the world actually behind you is beautiful. But they bought a telescope at a telescope shop in San Diego, and the guy who owned the telescope shop told this story after he found out about the mass suicides, that they came in and asked for the most powerful telescope. They had rounded up all their cash. They spent $3,000 in the 80s, 90s. That was a lot, and still is, but for that, not so much. A huge telescope. They put it together, brought it back 2 days later saying it didn't work because they directed it at the comet and there was no mothership. So the telescope was broken.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And that's what you see over and over again.
That's
People
right.
want the story to be true, that they're going to be saved. And they also don't question, do they need to be saved? Saved from what? They had friendships.
That's
they
right.
had a beautiful life. What were they being saved from? And also, did this thing exist? It must, because this person we love and trust is telling us it exists.
Yeah. So that's one of the earmarks of a really well-defined cult is the straw man, right? You have to create the enemy. You have to create that entity, that compelling force. In the addiction world, it's the nebulous force called addiction.
Right.
And
substances. It's not just substances now, though. It's all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you personify normal things into evil agents. And it's really wild. I'll be coaching people, and Michelle too, and they'll say, when I drink, it makes me happy, it makes me sad, it makes me stress relieved, it makes me escape, it makes me. And what we don't realize is that just that implicit language slowly brings us to the table of these solutions that now are the counterforce to this powerful entity known as alcohol, right? And Bill Wilson once said, you better do God's will or John Barleycorn will make you do it. Wow. And so you have all these endless quotes from this guy who, for the first time in history, personified alcohol to a literal being and disease that didn't exist and has never existed. It's a lifeless substance. So it's really fascinating how, in that case, you create a straw man, and then you have something to rally against. And usually it's the half truth is, here's the deal. The part that's true is people's lives are falling apart from alcohol, right? This relationship with alcohol. So you take something that is actually happening, and then you manipulate it slowly, and you get further and further in this mythology, and it gets weird. It gets really, really weird. And after a while, you're believing this stuff. And I did. You know, as a little kid drinking at 12 years old, all of a sudden I said, I'm an alcoholic, like within 3 times of drinking, you know, and this was all put in my head.
Away too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just waiting to go in the cult now for 6 years, just waiting to, I'm going to have to be in AA.
Well, I mean, even the beliefs about alcohol are mythology in and of themselves, like the propaganda. The marketing is so fantastic for alcohol. It's that like many people, even people that don't have problems with alcohol, will say things like, it's been a rough day, I'm gonna have some drinks so I can relax, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they don't realize that like when I actually had a coaching session today, and I you know, she was talking about drinking, and it helps me to relax. And then in the same conversation, we talked about how she got in a fight with her boyfriend
because she was drunk.
Because she was drunk. And I said, wait a minute. I thought you were relaxed. And she's like, well, it also makes me kind of angry sometimes. And I'm like, can't do both.
Yeah, a chemical.
It's not possible.
Yeah. A molecule. That's a magic molecule that makes you, angry.
But we just accept these things because it's cultural. They're in our culture. So
right, absolutely, they're in our culture, and there are these phrases that you adopt and you repeat. And when things are repeated over and over, they get under your skin, and you start to think that is the answer. That's the truth.
Yes.
And just like you pointed out, okay, let's review for a minute. Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Then a person will become aware.
Yes.
But it takes, I think, really pinpointing the self-talk, the language.
Yes.
That then you can undo it. But it takes also a lot of repetition to undo it. You know, it really is hard to get it out there. Mm-hmm.
It does. And I think that's the same for when people, we help people extricate themselves from AA and NA and some of these other groups that are to help young men with porn problems and things like that. And the amount of shame sometimes that people feel when they're leaving, that when they start to see it for what it is, and they're like, how did I get sucked in so easily? And I mean, that to me, it's like, it's so important for people to understand that when you're in a vulnerable place, that you said it earlier, when you're in a vulnerable place, there is comfort in being directed and guided and not having to think for a little while. Now, both Mark and I aren't people who do that well. Like we were kind of question everything people, which put a lot more pressure on us, I think, as young people.
It did.
But it also made us vulnerable too, as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you think? I'm going to bring this back to you as we slide into the end portion here. So why do you think, what was it about your personality that made you stick with this and inquire so hard?
With this subject, like looking into AA or about
any of it, with the subject in general, all of it, cults. I realize that you landed into the spot, but a lot of people wouldn't stick with it. What is it about you?
You know, it's interesting. What is it about? Right. I mean, I a little bit glutton for punishment, I have to say, because I didn't know that about myself, but I was
join the club,
right? Totally. I was raised in a household where there was the idea of not letting the bullies win.
Yeah.
And that is a hard one sometimes, because
it is.
Right. And because then you're up against the bullies. And so what I noticed was that I started to really be bothered by what I was seeing in these cases that came to me, people who came to me, and they talked about being labeled things, like in AA being labeled an alcoholic.
Yes.
And you might not be that. And probably a very small percentage of the people that are called something and diagnosed something are that. So I would have people come to me, a lot of women too, who would say, well, I'm a very difficult person, or I am this, or I'm really, they would say horrible things about themselves. Well, I know that there's a part of me that's really a whore. And I'm thinking, what? And because they let their shoulder show in some very fundamentalist whatever. And while the men could wear shorts, she's now, this prostitute, according to them. So what is it that I could do to help people really find out who they are and be able to shed the things that they were made to feel about themselves that then inform their life decisions and how much they feel deserving or not of good things in their lives? That really mattered to me. And so in a micro level, helping people gain freedom, helping people break free from someone who is taking advantage, someone who's enjoying their power way too much, and shouldn't be given that power anymore, but a person doesn't know how to help themselves get out of it and how to stay out. That's also hard. So that I care about the individual and individual freedom. And then also on a macro level, that I, coming from a background of family touched by the Holocaust, I care about groupthink, and I know where it can go, and I don't like it, and it scares me. And so I'm trying to do my part to help people be kind of the black sheep in a good way, to be the one who says, no. There's this photo I remember seeing. It was a black and white photo in the 1930s, and it was at a Hitler rally. And there was, I don't know if you've seen it, there's one person, everyone else is doing the Heil Hitler salute, except for one person who has their hands down, like crossed. And it had a red circle around him, and it said, be that person.
Yeah.
And I thought, but it's hard because I don't know if he made it out of there safely because he wasn't willing to go along. But so when I see political movements, religious movements that are encroaching, that are using fear tactics to get people to believe that they have to believe that way, and they have to leave their critical minds at the door, that's where people are giving up their safety nets, and they don't realize that that's what they're doing. And they also don't realize that the person who's at the forefront of that, who says, I'm doing this because I care about you and I care about society, they don't care about you at all, and they don't care about society at all. They care about having power over you and having power over society. And I don't like the dishonesty of that. And also, again, having in our recent history where that can go and where that can lead. So yes, on an individual level, I care about people being able to have the lives that they are supposed to have, where they can also feel that they can have joy, and they can feel that they can trust themselves to make good decisions and have that kind of confidence that has been stripped away from them. And then also in a global sense, it really matters to me. So I think that's what's kept this fire under me to keep going, even though I've gotten harassed and, been followed by Scientology and all these other people who do things, and Reddit discussions about me, whatever, making up a lot of things. I mean, it just is this cesspool at times, whatever. But you just have to keep going if you care,
Yeah, that's so true. That's great.
Well, that really gave the audience the context of where you're coming from, because I grew up with German parents from World War II era. They were born in 27 and 28. And they were indoctrinated into the Hitler Youth. And then my father realized before he was sent to Berlin, oh my God, I'm wearing the uniform where people came and killed our relatives. And so he bailed. He jumped off the train.
He did.
And then he went to Austria. And there's this whole story about him finally making it to America. They thought he was a spy. They put him in the American army because they thought he was a spy. It's so crazy because as a kid, I remember pictures of my dad in a German uniform. And a USA Army on a tank.
Wow,
I was like, what
incredible.
So I didn't even understand this until I was in my 30s when he sat down in front of a camera and he told his story, and none of us knew any of this. It was really fascinating. But then I understood why I'm a fighter, because my dad was a total nonconformist. He did not trust. He never had an accountant. He never had any type of government official.
He always ran his own business.
Always had his own money. We lived in a house with what was called the Luftenskeller, which was a bomb shelter, because his house was bombed when he was a kid. So he believed that America was going to be bombed. So he lived a sort of paranoid existence, but he was just like, fuck it, man, I'm going to do what I want to do.
He was,
and I caught that. And she has that with her dad. Her dad's a nonconformist to the nth degree. So even though we got indoctrinated by our other parents, in certain ways, and by society, there was always this backbone like you have, where it's like, this doesn't add up, man.
Yeah.
And there's this whole other way of seeing things that gave us the power to leave the cults and see it for what it was, but also have the backbone to be able to say it publicly.
Well, and question. I like what you said about the group think.
Yeah.
Because it's always, I instantly see red flags on both sides politically. Like I instantly see red flags, and we people kind of assume our political leanings, which I think is hilarious because both sides hate us. I mean, I think which is tough because it's like, it's the group think just scares me.
Yeah.
It really, really scares me. And his father only passed away a couple of years ago. But he said it. He was like, ooh, things are going in a bad direction. Like he recognized it, and it's somebody that lives long enough to see history repeat itself.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I didn't know that was going to happen in my lifetime. I didn't know it was going to be something my kids were going to be needing to deal with and having to worry about and not feeling safe. And, going to high holiday services for me as a Jewish person and having to put our things on a conveyor belt, like at the airport. I mean, having, and bomb sniffing dogs, it is. And we're just going to go to pray. I mean, like, it is really, really difficult to see all of that. And there are a lot of minority groups throughout the ages who have had that and have had it so often that they just wonder if it's ever going to be different for them. But I think, groupthink is something very interesting to me. The hive mind is something that gives me kind of goosebumps at times when I think about it. And there's someone recently who was telling me about her experience growing up in a family-run cult where not only did they have group think, but they were only allowed to feel things that other people were feeling. You could only all be sad at once, or you had to all be happy. I mean, just the disengagement from the self is so hard. So I have people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and older who are coming out of their groups or their marriages or whatever it is and saying, I don't know who I am.
Yep.
Yes.
And I don't know how to find out. And what do I think? And what do I feel? And is it okay? And just to be so disconnected, dissociated from the self just because someone needed to have conformity, someone needed to have power over you, which meant that everyone had to behave the same way. So they knew that everyone was in lockstep, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And it's alarming that it's still happening, and it happens all around us still.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Yeah. Freedom is a wild thing. One of the ethos of the freedom model is that you have autonomy, right? You are your own being. You have free will. You are a thinking creature. You have consciousness. And that you have what we call the positive drive principle, which is that you're always motivated by what you believe is going to benefit you. That doesn't necessarily mean that what you think benefits you is going to end up well, though. So that's the tricky one. So you can use your free will, you can use your autonomy and still hang on to that individuality. But if you follow something that ends up being disastrous, well, it's disastrous, So if you have misinformation, you can still have all the attributes of a human being that are really beautiful, but end up in a bad place. And then if you let go of free will, the concept of free will, that I'm not a chooser, and then you also start to have your autonomy stripped from you through belief, well, my God, then you're in real deep trouble. You know, so our whole model is predicated on those three ideas, that making the student know that they really are truly autonomous. And one of the books we have them read is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, of course, which is the seminal work on an individual being free in the mind, you know, and of course the Stoics are great for that too. And there's just a lot of work, but people need to know that they're okay inside, that they are capable. They are capable.
They really are. Right. They're capable of leading themselves well. They're capable of making decisions. They're also capable of making mistakes and having it not be the end of the story.
That's right.
Right? That you can turn things around. Like, let's say you said, I'll never do that again, or I'll never have another cigarette. I don't know, whatever. And then you do, you know, you don't have to say, like you've been told in a lot of these 12 steps, well, then that's it. That's just the beginning of the end. See, you couldn't trust yourself, and you should have come and you should have abstained 100%. Instead, you get to say, I'm not so happy with myself that I did that. Let me see if I can get back on track. It wasn't that I did something bad.
That's right.
It's just something that I want to do differently. And let me give it another shot. Like, have a sense that you can turn things around without it being that you have to be so worried about making a mistake. I think also there have been a lot of studies about brain analysis, and there's this idea that the stronger the person is, the more capable they are in their world, the more flexible their mind is. And so when you have a flexible brain, it doesn't mean you're open to everything. It means you're open to changing your mind.
That's right.
That's it.
Based on new information, based on new facts. It's the scientific model, but for life.
Yeah. Adaptability.
And it's great. Exactly. Adaptability. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing. And I can't wait for Mark to be on your show. And it's just, how do people find your podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yes. And I also can't wait to have you on, Mark. I can't wait to get into all of the stuff that I want to learn more about. And I want you to be able to share with my listeners. So people can find me. My podcast is the IndoctriNation Show. I think there's another one that's more of a conspiracy theory one called Indoctrination. So this one has a capital I, capital N, IndoctriNation. And you can find me there. You can also go to my website, rachelbernsteintherapy.com, and reach me through that and find other videos that I put together and webinars and other sorts of things. And if you want to reach out and talk because you're having an issue or someone you love is, feel free to be in contact.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to close it, but you can stay on for just a minute. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And remember, like and subscribe to the Addiction Solution Podcast.
That's right. And if any of you are interested in being a coach with the Freedom Model, check out how you can do that at thefreedommodel.org.